Citation 614 Bravo, Lakefront Tower. Do note, I've tried him 4 times, 5 times, he hasn't answered 1 time.
A tower controller has lost the communication with November 614 Sierra Bravo shortly after taking off.
Citation 614 Sierra Bravo, Lakefront Tower, how are you?
By now, it's been more than 5 minutes since nobody heard about them.
Yeah, how did you get the phone with that citation? Don't say anything, I don't see him, or I haven't seen him at all. I'm going to Coast Guard now, if I haven't fly over.
2 weeks later, they find the first aircraft debris. Let's understand what happened and what can we learn from it. The aircraft involved in this accident was a Cessna 525C, also known as the Citation CJ4. It was built in 2012, it had a total of 861 flight hours at the time of the accident, and it's an aircraft part of the Citation family. Many pilots who hold the single pilot type rating for this model, they previously have had experience with other models, like for example the Citation Mustang. And this was exactly the case for a pilot who owned the Mustang 2 years previous to buying the CJ4. This aircraft has 2 turbofans rated at 3,600 pounds of thrust, and it has 11 seats, 2 seats for the pilots and 9 for the passengers. However, is rated for single pilot operations. The aircraft was compliant with all the airworthiness directives and the service bulletins, and in the latest inspection done in December 17, 2016, approximately 12 days before the crash, the mechanics didn't find anything that raised any kind of concerns. It was an inspection regarding the service bulletin for the oxygen regulator mask, and there was no applicable action from that service bulletin. The pilot was a 45-year-old male with a total experience of 1,205 flight hours. Out of these hours, only 56 were in the Citation CJ4. His single pilot type rating was added on December 8, 2016, and his most recent logged flight was on December 17th from Orlando International to Ohio State University Airport. Out of the 56 hours, only 8.7 hours were as a pilot in command, and this includes the check ride. So we have a pilot who has 2 years experience in the Mustang, adding up to 373 flight hours. However, in the CJ4, he is relatively new and he only has a few flights. According to conversations with the pilot's instructors and the examiner, he did very well. He passed the test with no issues at all, and he was extremely professional. However, the NTSB, in one of the interviews with the flight instructor noted that the pilot pressed the autopilot transfer button instead of the autopilot button when wanting to engage the autopilot. And this unfortunately will be relevant later on for when we investigate the root cause of this accident. On the day of the accident, the pilot, his family and 2 neighbors decided to go from their hometown in Columbus to Cleveland to watch the game between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Boston Celtics. The game started at 8 p.m., so they decided to take off from Ohio State University Airport in Columbus at 5:30 and head towards Burke Lakefront Airport in Cleveland and arrive there at 6 p.m. So it's a short 30-minute flight. During this flight, there were no incidents, no relevant information for the accident. And upon arrival, the pilot greeted the airport service personnel and asked if it was going to snow during the evening. The personnel told him that there might be a chance, so keep an eye on the weather. And the pilot mentioned that if it was going to snow, he was going to call and get the airplane inside a hangar. The match finished, the Cavaliers won, and the group decided to go back to the airport and fly back to Columbus, to the Ohio State University Airport. In terms of the meteorological conditions, observations from Burke Lakefront Airport and Cleveland Hopkins International noted that marginal visual conditions prevailed at the time of the accident. The wind was blowing at 25 knots with gusts up to 31 knots. The visibility was around 8 miles in light snow, and there were scattered clouds at 1,200 feet above the ground level. Upon arrival to the airport, the service personnel noted that the pilot checked the wings for ice, and he also wiped them with a towel. The wings were wet, but there was no ice, so he directed the pilot out from the parking area, and the group was ready to take the flight back to Ohio State University Airport. Now let's see the sequence of events that happened from the moment the pilot was cleared for the IFR to Ohio State University Airport until the moment of the unfortunate crash. At 22:47, the pilot contacted the tower controller and requested an IFR clearance. At 22:50, the pilot requested a taxi clearance, and at 22:55, the pilot informed the controller that he was holding short runway 24 and ready for takeoff. The controller cleared the pilot for takeoff and instructed him to turn right to a heading of 330 and maintain 2,000 feet mean sea level. The pilot acknowledged the clearance. At 22:56, the engine power was increased for takeoff, and approximately 15 seconds later, the airplane became airborne. Here is where, during the normal procedure, the pilot will activate the autopilot, and the autopilot will follow the heading and the altitude that was indicated previously on the flight guidance panel. Now, unfortunately, the pilot does not engage the autopilot. At 22:57 and 9 seconds, an automated voice enunciated altitude. A second altitude annunciation followed 14 seconds later, and at 22:57 and 25 seconds, a sound similar to a decreasing engine power was recorded. 2 seconds later, the enhanced ground proximity warning system enunciated an excessive bank angle warning. About 2 seconds after the bank angle warning, the tower controller instructed the pilot to contact departure control. The CVR recorded the reading back of the pilot saying to departure 614 Sierra Bravo. However, the controller didn't receive this communication. At 22:57 and 37 seconds, the controller again attempted to contact the pilot. However, 2 seconds after the controller's transmission, the EGPWS provided a sync rate warning to the pilot. The pilot again responded, 614 Sierra Bravo, but this was not received by the tower controller. Beginning at 22:57 and 43 seconds, the EGPWS provided 7 pull-up warnings, spaced 1.6 seconds in between, and that happened until the end of the CVR recording. The aircraft impacted the water at a speed of 300 knots in a 15-degree nose-down attitude, killing instantly the 6 people on board. The tower controller tried to contact the aircraft for several more minutes. There was no reply back. He contacted departure to see if maybe they heard about them. Nobody knew where the aircraft was, so he started the procedures for search and rescue. And eventually, 2 weeks after the accident, they found the remainings of the aircraft. To understand the root cause of this accident, we have to go back to the pilot's previous experience with the Citation Mustang. The pilot's previous experience on the Citation Mustang interfered with the knowledge he had in the CJ4. This is called negative learning, and particularly it happened with the autopilot system. On the Citation Mustang, the autopilot is located on the lower left side of the automatic flight control guidance panel. On the CJ4, the autopilot engage button is located on the upper right side of the panel. Now, because the pilot had more experience in the Mustang than in the CJ4, there is a chance that under a situation of high workload, stress and fatigue, the pilot might have mistaken the position of the autopilot engage button, and he might have pressed the autopilot transfer button, which just transfers the flight director from one side of the cockpit to the other, but this button doesn't engage the autopilot. Additionally, in the Citation Mustang, there is a light next to the button that is illuminated when the autopilot is engaged, and this light is not present in the CJ4. The only way to know if the autopilot has been engaged in the CJ4 is by checking at the top of the primary flight display. According to the NTSB, the probable cause of the accident was spatial disorientation. Contributing was the pilot fatigue, the mode confusion related to the status of the autopilot, and the negative learning transfer due to the differences in the attitude indicator. So I hope you learned something from this unfortunate event, and if you have the time, share it with others in the comment section below. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.